Welcome. You know it, as always, Mitch I Am is the YouTube name. Please, if you haven't already, click subscribe. It would really help out. Like the videos, leave a comment. If you don't like the content, dislike it. Just some way interact with the videos. It'd be greatly appreciated. I was sitting around. I was like, I can't wait any longer. I can't keep pushing it off. I want to take a look, a first dive at Green Bay's Week 1 opponent, the Philadelphia Eagles. As I said, a lot of NFL, NBA content on this channel. It'll be a lot of Packers talk, a lot of New York Knicks talk. Focus right now on the Packers. Week 1 in Brazil is a week away, and I thought it was appropriate. 7 days out, we can start looking, really diving in to Philadelphia, the opponent for Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers. Starting with last year for Philly, too, as we dive right in, a 10-1 start. Tremendous start for Jalen Hurts and company. Nick Sirianni, the head coach, still there. Looked like they were well on their way to really vying or being right in the thick of things with San Francisco for that top seed in the NFC. And then really unpredictably, and I don't think many people saw it coming until the wheels really started coming off the bus, Philadelphia just collapsed at the end of the year. They started 10-1. They finished 1-6, and that includes a playoff loss, a drubbing at the hands of Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And you can simplify this with Philadelphia if you want to. If you really want to zoom out the microscope, you can zoom it out and say, hey, you know what? The offense, when you break things down, it was a mess. During that 1-6 collapse to finish the season, the offense was a disaster. And you can look at the defensive side and say, man, that wasn't much better. In fact, the defense worse than the offense when you look at it from Philadelphia's perspective, again, during that 1-win, 6-loss finish to their campaign a year ago. But it really takes that deep dive to figure out what exactly went wrong, why the gears stopped turning for Philadelphia during that stretch run that led to that disaster of a finish and a playoff game against Tampa Bay that, if I remember correctly, going in, it was almost a pick-em. You know, Philadelphia was 1-5 at that time to finish the regular season, but going up against Tampa Bay in the playoffs, I think it was close to a pick-em, and Tampa Bay just destroyed them. I think it was 32-6 or 32-9, 32-10, something like that was the final score in that first-round matchup, and Tampa Bay advanced, of course, to then take on Detroit. Couple of changes for Philadelphia this year. Nick Sirianni seemed like he was on the hot seat. He survived. He's back. Now probably really on the hot seat, but gone our offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator in. Kellen Moore comes over to take over the offense, and the vet, Vic Fangio, Fangs, comes over to take over the defense in Philly. Starting with the offense for the Eagles, they did have some moments during that tailspin of a finish. They had moments. Now, did it come against great competition? Not necessarily, but you can't pick out who you're playing on a schedule. They did put up 33 points against the Giants during the 1-6 ending. They did put up 31 against an Arizona Cardinal team that had all but mailed it in, and the Cardinals ended up beating Philly in Philly 35-31 in a game that you really knew things were at DEFCON 0 for Philadelphia after losing at home to an Arizona team that was already out of the playoff running and giving up 35 points in. But the offense showed some flashes, 33 against the Giants, 31 against the Cardinals. But there seemed to be one very glaring, obvious problem with Philadelphia's offense. Teams were blitzing the hell out of Jalen Hurts. They were blitzing early. They were blitzing often. They were blitzing on first down. They were blitzing on third down. And teams were bringing pressure against Jalen Hurts in the Eagles offense. And it's an offensive line that had Lane Johnson. Jason Kelce has since retired, but they had Jason Kelce. They had a lot of veteran presence. Not even veteran presence. You're talking all-pro caliber offensive linemen. In the blitz, it just hit home. The blitzes hit home for opposing teams going up against Philadelphia. Last year against the blitz, Jalen Hurts completed 60% of his passes. Here's the big number. 6 touchdowns when facing the blitz last year, opposed to 8 interceptions. He had 2 more INTs than touchdowns when facing the blitz a year ago. I don't want to say it was a full-on panic for Jalen Hurts. It was just sloppy. Didn't know how to decipher it. Didn't know where to go more times than not. And it was a big reason why Philadelphia had issues offensively. Teams started figuring it out. Oh, bring pressure. No quarterback's going to be at their best when facing a blitz, but you have to find solutions. You have to find answers. Philadelphia couldn't do that. They could not do it on offense. Hurts was 22nd among qualified quarterbacks in completion rate, 28th in passer rating in those two categories. One would imagine it has been a point of emphasis this offseason. Mentioned Kellen Moore takes over as the OC. You would have to think day one he's already looking at ways to solve that riddle for Hurts and the rest of the crew. Because if you're ignoring that and you're putting it on the back burner, good luck this year. You can't ignore it. It was that bad. It has to be fixed. Has to be reconciled. Philadelphia knows it. Hurts knows it. The offense knows it. Kellen Moore coming in knows it. They're not naive to it. Losing Jason Kelce, mentioned that. Kind of the brains behind the offensive line, the maestro, if you will, certainly isn't going to help things. Not going to help things for Philadelphia losing Jason Kelce. Kellen Moore, he's bounced around a bit, but he's still highly regarded. If I'm Green Bay's defense entering this matchup in week 1, you got to test him. Keep in mind, this isn't Joe Barry's defense anymore. And if everything we're hearing and seeing is correct, Jeff Hafley has a group that will play fast, they'll play free, and they're going to force the issue. And they're going to force the issue a lot. Not going to rest on their laurels, not going to sit back, not going to, I think one of the things that drove Packer fans nuts, myself included, be 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, Green Bay's defense on the field. They're playing 15 yards off the line of scrimmage. You don't got to be a genius. You don't have to be an NFL quarterback or an NFL coach to say, hey, you know what? We don't got to be too creative here. We need 5 yards to move the sticks. Their corners are playing 15 yards off the line. And was there some cherry picking with Packer fans in those moments? Perhaps, because it wasn't like it was every time, but it sure seemed like it was a heck of a lot more than it should have been in those scenarios where Green Bay's defense was just not playing aggressive. They weren't playing loose. They weren't playing fast. They weren't playing aggressive. And it seems like Hafley taking over the defense for Green Bay is instilling that in their minds from day one. So the Packers defense should be wanting to test out and see if Philly has changed their ways when facing some pressure and putting it in Jalen Hurts' face. And so that will be one interesting thing to absolutely keep tabs on in this Week 1 matchup in Brazil. On paper, it's a recipe, and I would say it's the recipe that Philadelphia struggled with last year that Green Bay can bring to the table. Bring some pressure. Press man coverage. Really force it with Philadelphia. Don't sit back and let him be comfortable and pick things apart. That's the disaster scenario for Green Bay in Week 1. Flip it to the other side of the ball. Again, Mitch I Am. The YouTube channel, please click subscribe. Trying to build it up. Going to be pushing out a lot of Packers content before Week 1 against the Eagles. Other side of the ball, the defense for the Eagles, the aforementioned defense, to me, objectively worse than their offense down the stretch. It was a dumpster fire. Any way you want to describe it, that would be bad, messy, horrific. It would fit the bill for how Philly's defense played in their last 7 games or during that 1-6 finish. Digest some of these numbers if you will. Please do. I'm inviting you to do so. Digest these. During that 1-6 finish, Philadelphia gave up 42 points to San Francisco. They then gave up 33 to Dallas. Those are 2 pretty good offenses, though, right? Then after that, you got some backup quarterbacks peppered in there for a couple of games. You give up 25 to the Giants. You give up 35 to the Arizona Cardinals, 27 to the Giants the second time around, and 32 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the playoffs. Again, 42 points by the Philly defense yielded to San Francisco during that stretch run, that disaster. 33 to Dallas, 25 to the Giants, 35 to the Cardinals, 27 to the Giants in the second matchup, 32 to the Bucs. The Giants part's the most alarming to me. You gave up 25 to a backup quarterback for the Giants in an offense that was not good at all last year. And then you got him a couple weeks later, and you're like, all right, we just gave up 25 to the Giants. Let's figure this out. It can't possibly be as bad as it was the first time around. Well, they gave up 2 more points. They gave up 27 in a loss to the Giants in that next matchup. Not good if you're Philadelphia's defense. Again, though, Vic Fangio coming in hoping to change things up. But you ask the question, what happened towards the you can't call it a run to the finish line for Philly. What happened when they were moving at a snail's pace towards the finish line last year? A 10-1 start, a 1-6 finish. What happened defensively that really flipped the script for them in a negative way? 2 years ago, Eagles edge rushers had 38 sacks. 2 seasons ago, 38 sacks from Eagles edge rushers. I'm repeating numbers because I'm throwing a lot your way. Last year, they had 16 sacks through 9 games from edge rushers. So a little more than half the season. So again, 2 years ago, Philadelphia had 38 sacks from edge rushers. Last year, they had 16 through 9 games from that department. The 4 games after that, they had 4.5. In the last 4 games for Philadelphia, 0. 0 sacks from edge rushers the last 4 games of the regular season, and just 4.5 in the final 8, compared to 16 in the first 9. The pressure they were getting on quarterbacks became non-existent. It was like a balloon just deflating, but not quickly. It wasn't like popping a hole in a balloon and boom, it's all gone, it's done. It was a slow deflating of a balloon. You know, sometimes you get a little happy birthday balloon and, just, keep things right with the person who gave it to you. Keep the happy birthday balloon. You'll tie it around a door handle or something at home. You'll see it slowly deflate and fall to the ground. That's what it was like for Philadelphia. It wasn't like popping a balloon. It was a slow, painful death for that Philadelphia defense. 16 sacks first 9 games, 4.5 the following 4, 0 in the last 4 weeks of their season. And then there's one more stat that really stood out when I was doing the deep dive. Big plays. And for intents and purposes here, we will categorize big plays as 25 plus yards. 25 yards or more, we'll describe it as a big play for an offense. Philadelphia gave up 10 of those in its first 7 games. Not bad, right? Actually pretty good. Their first 7 games, they gave up 10 plays of 25 plus yards. In their last 10 games, they allowed 27 of those plays. 27 plays of 25 plus yards in their last 10. Jordan Love and this Packers offense should be licking their chops. And for nothing else, just to want to see a slight salivating on the mouths of this Packers offense. Just to see, has Philadelphia really figured it out? Have they righted those wrongs? Do they have the pieces to right those wrongs? Fletcher Cox retired. Hassan Reddick moved on. They bring in Devin White. They bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. But is this defense, have they actually figured it out? Well, Vic Fangio has his ducks in a row, right? So you want to believe, if you're a Philly fan, that they will figure it out. And part of it is it can't possibly be much worse for that defense than it was in those final 7 games. But you look at some of the numbers, the pressure on the quarterback stopped coming from the edge, and they were giving up one big play after another. Those two stats can kind of coincide and coexist with one another. If you're not getting pressure on the quarterback, they have all day to throw. They have all day to sit back there in a clean pocket. You're going to give up big plays. Kind of a domino effect for that Philadelphia defense. And keep in mind, this isn't some vanilla scheme in Green Bay. This isn't a Packers team holding the hand of a first-year starter anymore. We saw Jordan Love in his second half of the season and what he matured into. And it was pretty special. And you hope that's the Jordan Love you have going forward. And a lot of people think that it will be for Green Bay. So this isn't some vanilla scheme. You're not easing in a first-year starter anymore. It's the one thing I love about the Packers. It's not a wide receiver group where you can focus in on one guy. If you're the opposition, you can't say, man, we're gonna focus in on Justin Jefferson. We're gonna focus in on Jamar Chase. Of course, they have T. Higgins too, but these alpha, true number 1 wide receivers, and then just try to limit everything else. You can't say, hey, we're gonna focus in on Tyreek Hill and then live with the damage from the other guys. Green Bay has a ton of options on offense. It's not a wide receiver group where you can focus in on just one guy and try to neutralize him. It is a group that is littered with talent and production. Kept 6 on the roster for a reason. Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, Melton, Heath. Some studs. And don't overlook a guy like Bo Melton. Look what he did down the stretch run. Look at his game in San Francisco in the playoffs. Had a touchdown. Don't overlook Malik Heath. Big training camp. Big preseason. Some clutch catches last year. Think about that touchdown on Monday night against the Giants. I know the Packers lost, but he had the late touchdown catch to put them in front late before the defense, led by former defensive coordinator Joe Barry, gave up an easy touchdown to Tommy DeVito, but I digress. But this is a wide receiver group where it's pick your poison. And this Packers offense, in some senses, should be excited about facing this Philadelphia group based off how they finished their campaign a year ago. Now, all this isn't to suggest that the Eagles are going to roll over. It's not going to happen. They're a 2.5-point favorite over Green Bay at last look. Last time I checked, Philly 2.5-point favorite over Green Bay. Most believe the Eagles have or will solve the problems, the woes from the second half of last season on both sides of the ball, or at least are under the mindset and have the premise like it can't get worse. It's got to get better. There have to be improvements. There's too much talent on both sides of the ball for it to be this bad. So we're bringing in a new offensive coordinator. We're bringing in a new defensive coordinator. But the overall structure, we're keeping Nick Sirianni in place. It is a team with an incredible amount of talent. Mentioned they added C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They added Devin White. They added Saquon Barkley, one of the most dynamic running backs in the league when healthy. However, the struggles that I brought up, Jalen Hurts, 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions when facing the blitz. Jason Kelce retires. He was the brains of that offensive line, a defense that couldn't get pressure on the edge, a defense that gave up 27 plays of 25-plus yards in the last 10 games. Those are very real numbers, very real stats. And the struggles that Philadelphia saw in those departments, those are a lot of the strengths that Green Bay has. Getting some big chunk plays. You saw it in Dallas in the playoff game. You saw it in so many of those games to finish up the regular season as Green Bay pushed to get a wild card spot and get a ticket to the dance. Those big chunk plays were a big part of the offense for Green Bay. It wasn't really a dink and dunk offense. Really wasn't. Their offensive line did their own to hold up against opposing edge rushers and get those big chunk plays. And so from that perspective, Green Bay should think that they can have similar success, even if Philadelphia has sort of figured out where some of the pieces on the chessboard need to go. It makes for a very, very fascinating, appetizing Week 1 matchup. This isn't going to be the only video where we take a look at this matchup. Not going to be the only video in the lead-up to Packers-Eagles Week 1. I just thought, we're a week away. Let's start doing a little bit of a deep dive into this Philly-Green Bay matchup. Please subscribe. Mitch I Am is the name on YouTube. We'll see you next time.